everyone. My name is Claire Kim. I'm the Director of Curatorial Strategy with the Here and There Collective, and I'm here today with Amia Yokoyama. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is a very special feature, I feel like, because we haven't seen each other in 3 or 4 years. And the last time we saw each other, we were both living in New York. We had met when you were first starting to really dive into or turn towards ceramics. And obviously that has blossomed a lot since then. Do you want to talk a little bit about that kind of journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think ceramics is a medium that requires you to stay in one place for a long time, which is something I really love about it. Like it's the ground, but it literally is grounding in that way because you have to like be with it in a space for an extended period of time. I think the ability to really like dig deep into the medium blossomed once I came back to LA and was like settled down here and could find a studio to work out of. And then I could really like tend to the idea garden. The longer time I spent here, the more resources I was able to access, the more people I was meeting who were interested in the work I was making, who were like pointing me in the direction that I needed to go.
So you have a billboard project right now that's going up, I think.
Yeah, it's either today or yesterday goes live.
Okay.
I haven't checked in with it, but it's this public art initiative called Sunset Spectacular that I think it's the city of Beverly Hills funds it, and then the curator Jean Vaccaro reached out to me to do a slot. So basically it's a digital billboard that's used for ad space, and then every hour or something my animation will play for like 2 minutes and for the next 4 months.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the animation? Do you have a title?
So the animation is from, I kind of re-edited a piece that I showed in my solo show at Sebastian Gladstone last summer. That was a part of this like multi-screen video installation. And I re-edited and reformatted it for this showing of it, which is something that I really love about video, is that like a work can always be finished and always be reworked in a way, because the digital material remains the same throughout the whole process, you know? Like even a finished work could be re-edited a million times and be renewed a million times.
Which feels so opposite from ceramics.
Yeah, very much so.
And you all like often kind of push these two mediums up next to each other within these gallery spaces or wherever you're showcasing them.
Yeah, I think the contradiction in them is something that really appeals to me. It's like, and yet there's something that's so similar in how I think about them or how I use them within world building, or how thinking about three-dimensional space, or like using ceramics as another way to express the body, as well as like 3D digital modeling as another way to express the body.
I think it makes sense to me too, especially when I think a lot about how important this idea of world building, but in particular kind of like alternate realities are in your practice, and that kind of comes up in both, again, in the video practice as well as in the ceramics. And at least when we were working together, I think there were previous works of yours in video where there are ceramic elements inside the video as well.
Yeah, so these animations that we'll be playing on Sunset, they're made all with 3D scans of my sculptures or 3D scans of models, and the figures in them, there are some characters in them. Figures are kind of a hybrid of a body I made out of clay that I scanned, and I, in the digital realm, kind of like stitched it together with different 3D models that I downloaded. So it's kind of almost like my Frankenstein version of modeling. And part of that is a way to bring the ceramics or bring my hand into the digital space, and vice versa. And I'm super interested in this, like pushing the physical into the digital and bringing the digital into the physical, and kind of like this pushing in and out of those different realms. Like some of these pieces back there are 3D prints of, they're 3D prints of sculptures that I had scanned, and so they've had a digital existence and then they're printed back out into the physical, and so they've like sort of shape-shifted back and forth between these different alternate realities.
Share a little bit about this piece here, and particularly we're seeing this character quite a lot, and I would love to hear a little bit more.
So this figure appears in a lot of my work, and she's basically this archetype that is in a lot of anime and manga, and she's like the slime girl. And her mythology is that she's sort of made out of this semi-solid material that's like constantly undoing itself and constantly leaking outside of the perimeters of the body. And there's something very abject about that, and there's something very hypersexualized about that. And oftentimes, depending where you're looking, this character can be more on the pornographic end, and then other times is more this sort of villainized monster being, and sometimes a combination of both of them. And I guess what I really like about this archetype is that, and it comes more from, there's some like animated films that have this archetype in it, but it exists a lot on the internet as this sort of like almost like fan fiction passed around archetype that changes a little bit depending on who's explaining it, and it has this, and I like thinking about the internet as like this oral mythology too, where these stories and characters can kind of shift and change as they get passed around. But she sort of like literally embodies these more philosophical ideas about the body and about otherness and about objectification and abjectification, and this idea that the body has no rigid beginning or end, and that her ability to absorb another human being, rather than there's this sort of like additive idea, and she multiplies as well. So the fact that like there's many of them in my work, and
all different sizes, different facial expressions,
and I like that it's sort of abstracted. There's a density around like, is it the same character? Is there many of them? Are they multiplying? Are they reproducing? There's kind of, that's kind of left vague. And there's this sort of like rhizomatic reproduction system happening. I make these characters out of porcelain always, so even though I use other clay bodies, sometimes the flesh of these characters are always made out of porcelain because of the history of that material, and because of its comparison to flesh of like the porcelain skin and things like that. And it was this highly fetishized material that was imported from East Asia into Europe, and even before that, you know, like when Marco Polo was going around and to these foreign lands and collecting these exotic materials and bringing them back to sort of ignite the hunger of colonization of Europe. You know, porcelain was one of the things brought back along with gunpowder and along with the cavalry shell. And so there's this really rich and sort of troubled history with the material, as well as like physically, it's the only clay body that's translucent and has the ability to pass light through it. So there's many reasons why I feel like this character has to be made out of that material specifically, and why when I wanted to start working with porcelain for that reason, like what to make with the porcelain, these two ideas kind of matched up. And it is sort of, again, this fusion of this mythological creature from the more internet digital realm into this like very highly traditional ancient clay material.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked, because I think that it's so dense with information, right? Like it's kind of speaking exactly towards this completely digital space, and then you're pulling that out, like we were talking about earlier, in terms of that relationship between video, and then pulling and pushing the clay material into or outside of that kind of 2D screen. Yeah. And then at the same time, we're talking about this lineage, this history that is so specific to porcelain. And I think that it's great that other materials maybe surrounding this character could be made with different types of clay, but the kind of common denominator, whether the character is large or small or wherever it may end up, is always made out of porcelain.
Yeah, that's super important to me.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about these works behind us, these cage-like, branch-like works that I'm
so in? I started making these kind of like scaffolding-like structures because when I started scaling up in the more figurative work, you have to build this kind of like scaffolding structure in the interior. Within, so that it doesn't collapse on itself. And they were really beautiful, and they're kind of, the shape of these scaffolding is determined by where the weak points are. So they're kind of this organic form on the interior. And I'm really interested in like interior and exterior and flipping things from the inside and outside. And that's why I love working digitally or working with digital scans of my sculptures, because you can like enter the interior space of a sculpture and play with scale and things. So I wanted to bring the interior on the outside, and was thinking about that as also an important sculptural aspect to it, and also thinking about like a porous object, a porous form, because in the mythology of these figures, like them being made of slime, there's also this contradiction. I'm making them out of solid rock, you know, and so I'm kind of returning them to this like porous scaffolding-like structure where things can pass through. And if you look at slime on a microscopic level, it's like a thicket. Like it's a material that can trap certain things and pass other things through, and that's why we have a slimy finish on our eyes and slime in all of our orifices, because it's this barrier. It's a barrier, and at the same time, it's also a doorway. So
it works as both.
Things can't get in, but some things can. So there's even a contradiction in that, of thinking about what is a solid structure, but that can also allow things to pass through it, which is an interesting idea to me. So that's kind of how these forms started growing, literally.
As we wrap up, do you want to share a little bit about what you've been thinking about these days? Anything that's been particularly interesting, whether it's, I don't know, a book, a movie?
Yeah. I've actually been thinking a lot about devices of illusion, like ways in which we fabricate the feeling of awe.
Whoa. Yeah.
And that's been an idea that that I want to explore in my work, that I've kind of begun with some of these holograms and stuff, and
Fabricate, like pretend?
like magic, like a magic
yeah.
show, or like or like a holographic performance, or something that is there but is also not there, and there's a suspension of like knowing, where when you experience something, you lose your sense of knowing how or why or what, and in that moment you experience this feeling of awe.
Nice.
And that's something I'm super interested in.
Amazing. Now I'm super interested in it. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you
us in your
so
studio
much.
today.
It's so nice to have you, to see you again.
It felt really nice to kind of reconnect,
Yeah.
and it was, a nice reminder also of kind of who and what I was doing when we had first met. It was like a nice
so much
little
has
time machine
changed,
moment.
right?
So
We've both done, I
I
feel like
know.
3 lifetimes have passed since
I
then.
completely, especially with the pandemic,
Yeah,
for sure.
that's crazy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.